Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Daily Mirror Cost of Living Facebook Live question and answer session. Each week, every Thursday at 1 p.m, we are joined by a different expert where we discuss a different cost of living issue and how it affects you and your money. My name is Levi Winchester. I'm a money reporter here at the Daily Mirror, and this week I'm joined by Anna Stevenson, Senior Welfare Benefits Specialist at Turn to Us. Thank you so much for joining us, Anna.
Hello.
So this week we're going to be discussing the huge changeover of legacy benefits to universal credit. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments below or email us at mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk. So just to give an outline on what has happened this week, the Department for Work and Pensions has restarted its so-called migration process of moving people over from old-style benefits to universal credit. So this process had previously been paused due to the coronavirus crisis, but it restarted this week with 500 people initially being invited over to start claiming UC. Now, there are roughly 2.6 million people still claiming legacy benefits. So, Anna, shall we start by explaining which benefits are being replaced by universal credit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the simple ones to talk about are tax credits. That's child tax credits, working tax credits. Housing benefit for most working age people. So pensioners can still carry on getting housing benefit. Don't worry if you're over pension age. Some working age people who are in special kinds of accommodations, that's like temporary accommodation or sheltered accommodation, can carry on getting housing benefit. But for most people, housing benefit's going. Income support, income-related employment and support allowance, and income-related job seekers allowance. Now, I know that's a lot of jargon that I've just spouted there. Basically, there are different sorts of employment and support allowance and different sorts of job seekers allowance. Some of them are based on your income and some of them are based on your national insurance contribution record. So if you're getting one that's based on your national insurance contribution record, don't worry, no change. But if you're getting one of the income related ones that's based on how much savings you've got, how much income you've got coming in, then that's being abolished as well.
Perfect. So 500 people this week are being invited to move over to universal credit. Everyone affected by the changes will eventually move over by December 2024. So how will people know when it's their turn to move over to universal credit?
They'll get contacted. They'll get a letter through the post saying your old benefits are going to end. You need to make a new claim for universal credit. It's really important that people understand that this doesn't happen automatically. Their old benefits stop automatically, but the new benefit does not start automatically. They have to get on and make a claim for universal credit when they get that letter. That's really important.
And what happens if someone doesn't apply for universal credit? And how long do they get to switch to universal credit once they receive that notice?
So all of this is a little bit in a trial process at the moment. So at the moment, the plan is that the initial letter will say you need to make a claim for universal credit in the next 3 months. So they've got 3 months to make a claim before their old benefits just get cut off and nothing replaces them. Exactly what happens when that 3 months is out, at the moment, the DWP says that they're going to look at it on a case-by-case basis and that maybe in some cases they'll extend the deadline. But all of this is really new. So we don't know for certain what will happen at the end of that 3 months after you've had that notice.
And will some people, when will people likely sort of find out when it's their turn? So are some people likely to get moved over earlier than others, for example? Are some people going to be notified earlier than others?
It's being done area by area. So at the moment, it's only being started in 2 areas, in Bolton and in Medway. And then that'll expand as the process continues. But we don't know yet what the next areas will be, how many there'll be, anything like that. It's really early days.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've had a question here from Heather Hill asking, how about PIP personal independence payments. Is that changing at all?
If you're in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland, your PIP's staying exactly the same. No change at all. If you're in Scotland, PIP is actually being replaced by a new benefit called adult disability payment, but you won't need to do anything. You'll just get a letter in the post saying your benefit's being transferred to adult disability payment, but you'll still get the same amount on the same day. You won't have to fill out any forms.
Perfect, makes sense. And we've had another comment here from an Amy Campling saying, my universal credit has stopped because I'm earning too much in my job and wasn't even told this. So what are the kind of reasons why this would have happened, and should she have been notified about this change?
No, you wouldn't usually be notified about a change like that. So your universal credit is worked out anew at the end of every month-long assessment period. So they look at how much money you've had coming in that month at the end of the month and work out how much universal credit to pay you. So as your earnings increase, your universal credit is withdrawn. It's not pound for pound. When your earnings increase by £1, your universal credit goes down by 55p. But yeah, as your earnings increase, your universal credit decreases until eventually it reaches zero, which is possibly what's happened to Amy, though it could also be that there's been some other mistake in the calculation. So it would be a good idea for her to put her earnings and her circumstances into a benefit calculator like the one that we have on the Turn to Us website and just check that that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that, universal credit can be incredibly kind of tricky for a lot of people to work out, especially because, like you said, it fluctuates every month. So thinking about all these the people on legacy benefits moving over to universal credit, I know you just briefly touched on the benefit calculator a moment ago there, Anna. So should we talk a little bit more about that and how people can work out whether they'll likely be better off if they're being moved over to universal credit compared to their older benefits?
Well, this one gets a little bit trickier. So you can work out if you'll be better off, but you can't work out if you'll be worse off. And I'll explain what I mean here. So this only applies to managed migration. This is just the people who get a letter in a post saying your old benefits are stopping. We need you to make a claim for universal credit. That group of people, you can go online and do a benefit calculation and see if you'll be better off. And if you'll be better off, that's the amount of universal credit you'll get. But if you're going to be worse off on universal credit as calculated under the normal rules, you'll get what's called a transitional payment, which is an amount of money to top you up to the amount of money you were getting at the time your legacy benefit stopped. So what that means is that in the short term, you won't be any worse off. But actually, over the long term, you will be a little bit worse off because benefit rates are changed in line with inflation. So when inflation goes up each year, benefit rates go up a little bit. But that group of people who get that transitional protection, each time everyone else's benefits go up a little bit, theirs will just freeze at the same cash amount. So over time, they'll get a little bit worse off year on year.
So if someone has found out that they're going to be worse off on universal credit, or they suspect they won't get as much money on universal credit, what should they do? Should they stay put and move on to these transitional payments?
Yeah, so if you've not had this letter saying we need you to claim universal credit, if you're just somewhere outside of Bolton and Medway thinking maybe I'd be better off on universal credit, maybe I wouldn't, I'm going to get changed over anyway, you can use a benefit calculator to check if you'd be better off. If you would be better off, it may well be worth you making a claim and choosing to switch over now. But if you're going to be worse off, stay where you are because you won't get a transitional payment unless you stay on your benefits until you're told to move over to universal credit.
And with these transitional payments, how long do they last for? Is it presumably until your payments catch up with what you would have been on before on legacy benefits?
In most cases, yes, but there's a whole load of changes of circumstance that means that your transitional payments will stop. And these are what the DWP sees as big life changes. And they can feel really, really cruel. So one example is that if you're getting universal credit as a couple and you're getting these transitional payments as a couple, and you then split up or one of you dies and you become a single person claim, at that point the DWP says, oh, this is a new claim, we're going to take that transitional payment off you. There's a few other circumstances like that, such as moving out of work if you've been working and then you lose your job and you don't get another job within a certain amount of time. That can mean your transitional payments stop as well.
Yeah, it can just be so tricky, can't it? Because there's so many circumstances that obviously can affect your benefits. And I think probably the best advice to give people is after the benefits calculator would be to talk to a specialist, such as, the team that turned to us, just to kind of double check their background, double check their circumstances, because it can be an absolute minefield, can't it?
It can be really tricky, and there are lots and lots of advice organisations that you can talk to. You'll likely have some in your town, organisations like Citizens Advice. There's often a welfare service attached to your council, or specific charities for example, carers or disabled people can often provide benefits advice as well.
Absolutely. Just going to bring up this comment here from Tina Haywood. She says, if your universal credit stops due to wages, what happens to child tax credits and child benefits? Will I still get them?
Okay, well, your child benefit will carry on, so you don't need to think about that. Child benefit is not affected by wages until you're earning more than £50,000 a year. So it's quite a lot. Child tax credits. Now, if you're getting universal credit, then you're not getting child tax credits because you can't get the two systems at once. But I think what Tina might be asking is about the amount that's included for your children within universal credit. People often feel like it's unfair that their wages should affect the amount they get for their children, but the way universal credit works is that all your elements are added up, no element is protected, deductions come off the whole amount. So if your wages have been high enough to zero your universal credit entitlement, that's it, you just get paid zero.
So hopefully that answers your question there, Tina. I'm just going to bring up another question here from Robert Sanders, who says, who is better off on universal credit from the old system? No one, hardly. So there will be some examples of people who will be better off on universal credit. Do you want to talk through a few of the examples, Anna?
Yeah, well, a lot of the time, people who are in work find they're a little bit better off on universal credit. The amount that's provided for childcare is a little bit more generous on universal credit than it is in the old benefits. And the old benefits have these weird hours cut off. So if you're working 15 hours, you don't get any extra help. And if you're working 16 hours, then you do. And universal credit doesn't have those silly things in it. So people who are working hours that don't quite fit into the old system's very rigid rules might well find that they're better off on universal credit. Some disabled people are significantly better off on universal credit, but some are significantly worse off. It all depends on exactly what disability benefits you're getting in the old system. The two systems don't map onto each other very well. So it's a bit hard to talk about it in generalities because there's so many different circumstances that apply here. Really, the best thing to do is to use a benefit calculator on your own personal circumstances and see.
Absolutely. We've got another question here from Bridie O'Connor saying, what about ESA? So I'm assuming by that she means, is ESA being phased out in favour of universal credit?
Yes. So ESA is short for Employment and Support Allowance, and it comes in two types. There's contribution-based or new style employment and support allowance, and then there's income-related employment and support allowance. Now, these contributory employment and support allowance, that carries on being paid. So that's the benefit that's associated with how much national insurance contributions you've paid. But your income-related ESA, that's being stopped. That's being replaced by universal credit.
And we've got a comment from Jason Renshaw here saying, will universal credit affect my wife's personal independence payments?
Nope. No, your wife's personal independence payments will carry on being paid just the same.
Perfect. And we've got another reply actually from Tina Haywood here saying, I'm on tax credits due to partner working. I think that should be £17,550 per annum, but I'm getting £121 a week child tax credit. So I'll be worse off on universal credit. Does that sound about right to you, Anna?
There's so many other circumstances go into it. I really can't say. There's, questions about how many children there are in the household, whether anyone's disabled, whether anyone's a carer, the amount of their rent. I really can't say. All I can say is do a benefit calculator and make sure you've checked that you're not just relying on someone saying, oh, I reckon you'll probably be better off, because like I say, there's so many things go into this calculation. And yeah, if you are going to be worse off on universal credit, stick on your existing benefits for as long as you can and hope that you can hold out until you get that managed migration letter so that then you get the transitional protection.
And just for the people who are concerned about moving over to universal credit, Anna, is there any way for people to avoid going on it? Or once you kind of receive that letter, at the moment, is that looking likely that that's going to be it? You have to move over to universal credit?
Yeah, that's going to be it. The government does not want to be running so many different benefit systems. It's really expensive, it's really inefficient. So the government has a very, very strong incentive to get everyone moved over to universal credit. So yeah, once you get that letter, that's going to be it. You don't have the choice to stay on your existing benefits after that point.
Perfect. We've also had another comment here from a Jim Bogiasis saying, if you go through managed migration from ESA to UC, will you automatically be placed in the support group?
So quick explanation for everyone. ESA has different levels depending on how disabled the DWP considers you to be, in the worst possible way of framing that. But so there's the work-related activity group and there's the support group, and that's based on an assessment, a healthcare assessment. Yes, when you're moved over to universal credit, your status will follow you. So if you're in the support group on ESA, then that support group status will follow you through into universal credit. But sometimes you do have to remind universal credit staff that was supposed to happen.
And what is the best thing to do if you suspect there is an error in the benefits you are claiming that you're entitled to? Should you be contacting DWP straight away if you suspect
yes, definitely. The first thing you should do is run a benefits calculator and just check what benefits you ought to be getting. If you think there's an error, yes, tell the DWP straight away. Tell them very clearly what error you think has happened and what you'd like them to do to fix it.
Perfect. I think that's so obviously relevant at the moment with so many changes going on. Yeah, it's so important to keep an eye on everything.
We've got also the because of the very large number of new people who claimed universal credit during the pandemic, the DWP took on lots and lots of new staff. So there's quite a lot of new staff working on universal credit who might not always know all the details. So it is quite important to keep an eye on universal credit claim.
Of course, especially as you touched on earlier, where it fluctuates every month, it can be very tricky to kind of keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
We've got another comment here from Lana Cook saying, is carers allowance being phased out by universal credit?
Nope, carers allowance is staying just as it is. Lots of people who are getting carers allowance are also getting income support. Now that income support is getting moved over to universal credit, but carers allowance is staying exactly as it is.
So are you saying that part of your benefit allowance will change effectively when you move over to universal credit?
It depends. Quite a lot of carers do get income support, but quite a lot of carers also don't. So if you're one of the carers who's getting income support, then your carers allowance will keep being paid, but your income support will become universal credit. If you're one of the carers who isn't getting income support or isn't getting any of the benefits that are being replaced, then your carers allowance just keeps being paid.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know we touched on housing benefit a little bit earlier, Anna, but just to kind of recap this, because we've had a comment from Stephen Brown saying, will the change affect housing benefit?
Yes, it will. It won't affect housing benefit if you're over pension age, and it won't affect housing benefit if you live in temporary or sheltered accommodation. But for most working age people getting housing benefit, that's one of the benefits that's getting replaced by universal credit. So you are one of the people who at some point over the next 2 years will get this letter saying it's time to move on to universal credit.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question, Stephen. Just going to bring up another comment here from Caroline Smith, quite an interesting one, saying, if your child is starting to get disability living allowance, does universal credit backdate it to when they started receiving this, or is it from the time they changed circumstances on their claim to universal credit? It's quite a complicated one, that.
That is a complicated one. So disability living allowance is the disability benefit for children. And when you get an award of disability living allowance for one of your children and you're getting universal credit, it's really important to update universal credit that you're getting that award. And that is because your universal credit will go up. There is an additional amount in universal credit if you have a disabled child in the household. Now, this question about backdating, yes. In a very simple one-word answer, yes, they will backdate it to when the DLA award started and not to when you notified them of DLA. They can sometimes make a fuss if you're very late in notifying them of DLA. Let's say you were told that you were getting DLA back in January and you didn't think to tell universal credit until now in May. They might make a little bit of a fuss, but yeah, usually once you tell them that you're getting DLA for the child, they'll backdate that payment to the beginning of the DLA claim.
Perfect. We're getting quite a lot of questions in about pensions as well, Anna. So does any of the universal credit changes affect the state pension or any other pension entitlements?
No, universal credit is just a working age benefit. There are some people where you've got a couple and the older person's pension age and the younger person hasn't turned pension age yet. You know, it's relatively common that people are not exactly the same age as their partner. Those people will be getting universal credit, but universal credit doesn't affect your entitlement to your pension at all. It doesn't affect state pension, doesn't affect the payment of it. Yeah, no change at all there.
And are any Brits who are living abroad going to be affected by these changes?
I wouldn't expect them to, because these income-related benefits are not generally paid to people who are living abroad. So mostly if you're getting one of these benefits that's getting replaced by universal credit, you're already living in the UK.
Fantastic. Nice, straightforward answer there. So I think because we're kind of approaching the end of our broadcast, I think as we're still getting quite a lot of questions regarding which benefits are going to be affected, should we just recap again which people are going to be affected by these changes and when they will be notified, or the deadline of when people are expected to be moved over?
Absolutely. So the benefits that are being replaced: child tax credit, working tax credit, income-related ESA, income-related job seekers allowance, income support, housing benefit, except if you're getting housing benefit because you're a pensioner, or if you're getting housing benefit because you're living in temporary or supported accommodation. Easy. The plan is to move everyone who's on those benefits over onto universal credit by the end of 2024. We'll wait and see if that happens. That deadline has been extended quite a few times in the past, but that's the plan at the moment. When it's your time to move, you'll get a letter telling you that your existing benefits are going to stop and you need to claim universal credit. At the moment, the only people who can expect to receive those letters are people who live in Bolton and in Medway, but gradually that will be extended to cover the whole of the UK. But we don't have a timetable for that yet, and we don't know where the next areas will be after Bolton and Medway.
And obviously, once you receive this letter, you will then be given a kind of 3-month deadline to then switch over to universal credit? And then after that, at the moment, what happens after that, Anna?
At the moment, if you don't claim universal credit within that 3-month deadline, your existing benefits will stop and you will have no income. So it is really important that if you get that letter, you do get on and make a claim for universal credit. And if you are one of the people who's getting that letter, you will not be in the short term financially worse off by claiming universal credit.
And if you do put in your claim for universal credit, how long does it take for that payment to come through?
So when you make a claim for universal credit, it takes 5 weeks, well, 1 month and 1 week to get your first payment. Your existing benefits will stop 2 weeks after you first make a claim, apart from tax credits, which stop on the day you make a claim. So you make a claim for universal credit, 2 weeks later, your existing benefits stop, and 3 weeks after that, you get your first payment of universal credit. If you're going to struggle during that 3-week gap, you can take out a loan from universal credit and repay it from deductions for your benefit over the next couple of years.
Fantastic. And I think obviously the key advice right now, I think for anyone worrying, would be to use a benefits calculator, as you mentioned before, Anna, and also seek specialist advice from Turn to Us, from Citizens Advice, just to double check, because these benefit calculators are only kind of to give you a rough guide, and then obviously double check that against a specialist. Would you say there's any other advice for anyone worrying at the moment,
I'd
Anna?
say if you're feeling anxious about this and you're doing a benefit calculator and it's showing you that you're going to be worse off and you're feeling really, really anxious about it, remember, we can't at the moment calculate transitional payments on the benefit calculator. So that little bit of extra that you'll get to top you up to your current amount of your legacy benefits, that won't show on any of the benefit calculators at the moment. So don't get too scared about that.
Fantastic. Well, we've covered lots of questions here, so hopefully that will make the process a little bit more simpler for everyone who's feeling a bit anxious. But thank you so much for joining me, Anna. Really appreciate it, and you described everything hopefully very simply. And thank you so much.
Great to speak to you, and thank you everyone for your questions.
Thank you, guys. We'll be back next week at 1 p.m. For another Cost of Living and Facebook Live. So thank you, everyone.